Welcome to Applied Speaking, a podcast where I take you with me on my learning journey of becoming a better public speaker. This episode I was joined by Neil Bearden, an expert in storytelling. In the first hour of the podcast, we geek away a bit about how storytelling shapes your life, what stories you can tell about your life that empower you, and how you can overcome resistance. In the last part of the episode, we talk about storytelling and how you can tell better stories. Definitely be sure to check that part out. All right. Hey, Neil, welcome on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
It's so good to have you here, man. Neil, can you explain a bit about the story behind the story of the Plotwolf?
The story behind the story of the Plotwolf is I help people and companies with storytelling. And when I started out, I was calling myself a storytelling coach because I didn't know what else to call myself. And I thought that I would go in and help people articulate more clearly what it is that they want to say, turn it into a bit of a story. And then I kept finding over and over that people didn't need that so much as figuring out what their story is. They had no clue. I don't have anything to say. I don't really have anything interesting. I don't know what I should say. And so it turned into me just helping solve problems, solve much bigger problems than I anticipated. And the backstory to that is in the movie Pulp Fiction, which probably came out about 20 years before you were born, by the looks of you. There's a character called Winston Wolfe, played by Harvey Keitel, and he's the guy that you call to fix things. So if you're in deep doo-doo and you don't know how to get out, you've done some real gangster stuff, you call up the wolf, he shows up and he fixes things. He makes sure that things are okay. He solves problems. So Plotwolf became that. If you have a story, you don't know what it is, it's not working, or you don't even know what it is, then you call the Plotwolf, and the Plotwolf will help you fix your story. That's the background.
Okay, so it started more as improving people's skill of storytelling in general, but then it became this overarching thing of more personal life stories of people.
A lot of that, it began with, let me show you how to tell your story. And I presume that people knew what that was. And I was confronted with a problem, which is people, companies, they don't even know what the story should be. So it wasn't just that they needed some cosmetic tweaks, some little technical adjustments like a chiropractor, but we really just had to excavate the whole thing, and they needed a ghostwriter, they needed someone to coach them on the delivery, they needed something much bigger. Okay, they didn't need a tweak, they didn't need an adjustment, they needed a huge, absolute, massive fix, is what I kept finding. And just Plotwolf sounded cool, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you also had something like a story transformation for your own life in certain directions?
Yeah, my story about that is the boring background for me is I'm a professor right now. I'm a professor at INSEAD. And in September 2019, I went to a Tony Robbins seminar. So this is pre-pandemic. People could get together, 4,000 people in a room. I went to a Tony Robbins seminar, and we did an exercise on the third day that began with identify some candidates for limiting beliefs that you might have. That is, things that you might take to be true that are quite possibly false, that in believing that they're true are holding you back. Whereas if you discovered that they were false, perhaps you would have more potential than you realize. And I wrote down two. One is, I am just a professor. The implication in my mind is, what the hell else could I be besides being a professor, right? I'm 46 years old at this point. I've been an academic my whole life. What else am I going to do besides be a professor? That was the first one. I am just a professor. The second one was other people. Like I just got off the phone with an entrepreneur, a guy called Roger, started a company that was acquired by Alibaba. He's doing some new things. He's an entrepreneur, he's a serial entrepreneur. My second one was other people like Roger, I had in mind, take risk, but I don't really do that. And the package of these two beliefs is I'm only a professor, and of course I'm not going to do anything that's risky because I have tenure, I have a lifetime contract at a fancy school. Why would I give that up? That's not the kind of person I am. And then what we did is we imagined our lives first believing that. And I looked at myself 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years into the future. And 20 years into the future, I was this fat, old, ugly, miserable bastard in some shitty low-income apartment in San Francisco, all by himself, who had just been a disappointment to himself, to his family, to everyone, but most critically to himself. And that had led to some kind of downward spiral. He was the kind of guy who woke up, why did I only do this? What if? Why didn't I do that? Why did I take the safe path? And he had just become some obese alcoholic. I saw myself in the mirror, this big, huge face. Then we came back to the present, and I'm in a room with 4,000 people at the Expo Center in Singapore, and I'm shouting, I'm screaming, the guy next to me is wailing, the lady on this side of me is just sobbing in tears. People are shouting, no, no way, never gonna happen, not gonna happen to me, F that, no, 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 just shouting that this future is unacceptable. And then we come back to the present, and the next part of the exercise is imagine replacing those candidate limiting beliefs. And again, what is a candidate limiting belief? It's something that you hold to be true that quite possibly is false, but in holding it to be true, limits your potential. Okay, so let's flip it. Let's replace those beliefs with some other beliefs and see if we can expand our imagined potential for ourselves. And so basically I just flipped them. I'm not just an academic. Actually, I'm a very talented person. I can do a lot. I believe that. And actually, I have no trouble with risk whatsoever. What am I talking about? I do venture investment. I've like a standard portfolio allocation is maybe put 5 or 10% of your investments into venture because probably you're going to lose it. Put the rest in stocks and bonds. I flip it. I'm like 90% in venture. Right? I don't care. Risk doesn't bother me. And so I realized, okay, that's not true. I'm okay with it. And then we imagine living a life according to these new beliefs, the alternatives to the candidate limiting beliefs. And I looked at my life 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future. And at the end of that, at 20 years, that's as far out as we went, I saw myself at this long rectangular table next to this sliding glass door. Outside, it looked like Northern California coast. It was rocky, a bit breezy, just comfortable. And at the table with me is my wife. She's in some yoga pants. I'm looking quite fit. I'm carving my avocado toast. We're sipping, I'm sure, some fair trade, single origin coffee that probably some elephant shit out or, something probably like $100 coffee or something. I don't know what we're drinking, but it was wonderful. I see that in that world, life had turned out okay. I want that kind of future for myself. And so we came back and contrasting those two side by side, one, me continuing to walk to my little campus every day for the next 20 years, teach the same classes to the same kinds of students, right? They're the same every year, the same age. I'm getting older. I'm doing the same crap over and over. That didn't turn out good for me in my imagination. Me doing something different. And in that second universe, I don't know what I did except that I did something different, something quite radically different. So that was September 9th, 2019. I left that day knowing that I was going to do something different. I didn't know what. And then 6 months ago, I was actually making some coffee, and I looked at my wife. She was sitting at our table. She was eating some avocado toast. I was stirring my coffee, and I said, I'm going to quit my job. My wife said, okay. And we hadn't really talked about it, but she knew that I wanted to do something. And we decided, okay, this business that we've been kind of doing on the side, coaching, plotwolfing, helping CEOs articulate their message, this stuff, which was just kind of hobbyish at that point, kind of a side hustle, I realized actually there's an enormous business here with a lot of potential for us. We can live anywhere in the world, we can do it. And in a moment, stirring my coffee and her eating her avocado toast, we decided, I sent an email to my school, sorry, I'm retiring, I'm leaving, I'm done. And if you don't know academia, that means giving up a contract for life, right? How many people have that? A contract for life at, a reasonably reputable place. And I just decided that I was going to do it. I was going to do my own thing. We're going to focus on Plotwolf. And I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't experienced that story. And it was a story of my future. And one, it was me continuing this story that I was on then at that point, and contrasting that with a new story where I replaced those beliefs, which were definitely false, with the right ones. And the contrast of those two images, and by the way, when I talk about story, really what I mean when I talk about story is a mental movie. Okay, it's not some simple series of bullet points, not some little marketing sentence that someone calls a story. But for me, and we'll work on your story maybe in a little bit, I don't know what's going to happen here. When I talk about that, I'm talking about actually giving your audience a mental movie. So when I'm telling it to you, what I want you to see when I talk about what I saw, especially in the second scenario at the Tony Robbins event, is that long wooden table next to the California coast with the rocks outside, the breeze coming in, the yoga pants, the avocado toast, me looking quite fit, I hope, and Hansel, tailored gray beard. I want you to experience that. So when you start to experience your own future, your own potential through stories by seeing them, by visualizing them, by kind of daydreaming about them, I think storytelling starts to become not just some communication tool that you can use to increase your lead generation, top of the funnel, whatever BS you might read on LinkedIn, but actually to see your life more clearly. And I think that's the most interesting use of storytelling. Over.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You're looking quite fit right now, so I guess you're on the right path. Nice. What does your current work look like? Do you give classes to people, or do you guide groups or just individuals?
I do a lot of different stuff. So I do groups. With the groups, we get together. I did a group this morning, 8 people. We get together on Zoom. We work on conceptual story ideas. How do you take ideas and make them into these mental movies? What are the techniques, the tactics? And then we have lots of homework between times that we meet. And the group goes through it together and helps one another learn. That's one model. Another model, which maybe you and I will replicate here on this call, is just working one-on-one with someone, plot-wolfing. What's the story you want to tell? How can we turn it into this mental movie? What are the objectives you're trying to achieve? Another, which was the call I was on before this one, is if you have a company and you're trying to articulate what the story, the vision is for that company so that it's compelling to investors, maybe to people you would like to recruit, down the line when it goes from an idea to an actual product to customers, what is that story and how does that look like? So I have kind of a menu, a portfolio of things that I do, but it's all grounded in the Plotwolf idea of just figuring out what the story is, turning the idea into a mental movie that has certain characteristics, certain objectives, which will probably be brought up as we go throughout this conversation. I'm not going to front load everything, but that's the basic idea.
Yeah. Okay, so, and how do you know so much about storytelling? How did you learn all this?
I just figured it out, man. I didn't write for Pixar. I never got a Oscar nomination, nothing like that. I'm a guy who came to a business school. I did a PhD in psychology. I did a postdoc in neuroscience. I ended up in a business school, INSEAD, teaching statistics at first. Then did courses on behavioral economics. That's what I taught for a while, behavioral decision making. And really just realized that I could do it. I was quite okay as a teacher. I won a a bunch of teaching awards, and definitely not because when I was teaching statistics, not because I'm good at math, because I'm not. Actually, my math is garbage. I took a class in college, my freshman year, called pre-algebra, right? Pre-algebra, right? That's addition and subtraction probably. And in college, I got an F in that class. And then 12 years later, I find myself teaching statistics to MBA students who have all kinds of fancy backgrounds. And I did quite well teaching them that topic, not because of technical depth, but because I seem to be able to take the concepts and communicate them, articulate them through stories so that people got it and they remembered it, and they remembered it for a long time, I learned. And then I kept doing that. I realized, okay, I just keep doing that. I just turn everything into a story somehow. And I just go into class and I don't even show any slides anymore, I realized. And I just tell stories, and then people seem to understand the stuff at the end. Can I figure out how to tell them, my students, how to teach them how to do what I've been doing? And then I went to the MBA dean, hey, I would like to develop a class on storytelling. He said, okay. I had a bit of social capital because I'd done well teaching. Did it. The first time I did it, I realized, okay, I know how to do it a bit, but I have no idea what I'm doing. I can't articulate to them what I've been doing. I can tell them stories and entertain them, but I can't help them actually do it. And I had this huge just run-in with reality. Okay, I was a bit cocky because I could do it, but that didn't mean I could teach it. And then it was a bit humiliating, honestly. So, okay, I need to recourse, I need to pivot, I need to figure this out. And then I got every book I could, listened to everything I could, and just slowly just became an autodidact, right? I just taught myself. And I'm still making it up, but I've been making it up through so many repetitions and now with so many people that even though I didn't work at Pixar and I didn't make a Hollywood blockbuster, I don't have anything on Netflix, I didn't write a New York Times bestseller, I've worked with so many people because of my job. I've kind of learned what people are confused about and what they screw up and just figured it out and kludged it together, and it seems to work. At least it worked well enough for me that I gave up my job to keep doing it full time. So I made it up, dude, and I'm just still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Figure it out on the fly. One thing I experienced with storytelling, like you're describing right now, is I'm a 6th-year student right now. I'm 24, about 25, and I study anthropology now, but I started off with physics, and I tried physics for 3 years, and I failed badly at it, and just tried some other stuff, philosophy and stuff like that, and it wasn't until I started to let everything go and decided that university maybe wasn't something for me and that I wanted to try something else, that at some point I came across anthropology and decided to go study that. Started in the first year and was amazing. I was in a super good student at first and really motivated for the entire first year. And then after the first year, I lost my interest and started to gain interest in developing an app for cognitive behavioral therapy and started to do things like that, and eventually lost my interest in that. But I was just experiencing over and over again, like not really failing at everything, but losing my interest at everything. And I still liked the path I was going because I thought like, okay, well, maybe one time I come across something that I can stick to or something that I really enjoy doing. But it was hard to see once I just started to like drop out on anything. But a few months ago, I was writing an article about this. I was writing everything down and writing the story down, and then I gave it the twist of you can try it all. Like, you have permission to try everything, fail at everything, quit everything, and just try new stuff over and over again, just to experiment and see what you like. And if you don't like it anymore after a year, then you can just quit it again, because it doesn't make you a quitter, but you can just go try something else. And by writing that article and by rewriting my story about that was really giving me a lot of freedom and sense of confidence that I'm indeed going in the right direction. So that was absolutely something cool that I experienced in storytelling for my personal narrative.
I get it. The thing about the story that you just told me is I can relate to it. I'm, I'm surrounded by drums. I have some drums over there,
Mm-hmm.
and I spent a lot of time. I started learning drums at 40, practiced a whole bunch. I suck, but I don't care. I started drums, and now music sounds different. There was a time before drums that I used to sample vinyl records and make hip hop beats. And I don't do that anymore. But I did that, and now when I listen to music, I hear something in hip hop that I didn't hear before. I understand how it's made. And I've started many, many things, and for me, I experienced my own life as you were saying your story, and I realized that actually I'm a good starter of things, and I'm glad that I've done that. I'm really glad that I didn't have, and it does seem to be a personality type. I've started this, I must finish this, right? Because then life could be potentially very, very narrow because we start things with minimal information. We learn about them, we update our preferences, we learn more. And then hearing you say that, one other thing stood out, which is, well, here's a question for you. Before you wrote that article, and when you would talk about all these things that you started that you didn't continue, was it awkward to talk about? Did you feel like someone who wasn't a finisher, lacked discipline, lacked commitment? Did you have any hang-ups around it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it's fair to say that for me, the only writing down the article was the only factor. It was also that the things I'm currently doing is going in the right direction, and I'm also yeah, making money from it that I can live from after I finish my anthropology study. And yeah, I'm now doing this podcast that I'm really enjoying. So also stuff like that I'm really enjoying it in this moment, and I think it's cool what I'm doing myself. So I think that in combination with changing the interpretation of my last few years was really freeing. And so right now I'm definitely not feeling in any way awkward about telling about my past few years anymore. But I think, yeah, I kind of feel like this. Before 6 months ago, if there would be a high school reunion and I would go there, then I would feel very awkward about like what I've done in the last few years. But right now, a few weeks ago, I realized that I'm now like reunion proof. If I would be there, I would be just proud of what I'm doing right now and really satisfied with what I'm doing right now. So there was definitely this huge switch. Yeah.
Good. That's I expected that, and I can relate to that very strongly. And whatever series of events led to you being comfortable with it, if I had to guess, I would guess that a lot of the weight coming off becoming reunion proof, that each rep you put in when you tell your story to other folks about these pivots that you made, right? It makes you more reunion proof.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's something about the social aspect of sharing stories that's very cathartic,
Mm-hmm.
right? That makes us stronger. So when you package it, Freud called psychoanalysis originally the talking cure. And right, Sigmund Freud, he found out that, actually people seem to be getting better just by talking. Just talking to someone else, their neuroses tend to diminish somewhat. And there seems to be and basically they were telling him stories, right? He would ask about their dreams and they would turn into stories. They would talk about their life, but they would share stories with him and they would feel better. And now, right, we have psychology. Now you did CBT. All of that is a direct descendant of Freud and the talking cure.
Yeah.
And you consolidating your experiences into a story that you now freely share with other people that you just told me. I'm sure that you've told a whole bunch of people. It has that same cathartic effect. And what's required for that is just really absolutely owning it. right? We hear about authenticity and vulnerability and all these ilities and everything that ends with a Y. But the real power, I think, in storytelling is finding that stuff that makes you awkward at a reunion and finding some way to articulate it and share it where you just have absolute ownership of it. Like me, I told you about failing pre-algebra in college, right? Do you think I wanted people to know about that? No, right? For years and years and years, I didn't want anyone to find out about that. I wanted them to think that I was taking, matrix calculus when I was in fourth grade. That's what I wanted people to think, right? Because I wanted them to think I was smart. I didn't want them to know I was an idiot. But when I not only became comfortable with it myself, but when I could, just freely tell the world about it, that's when you get that exponential talking cure. There's something really powerful in it that you're experiencing.
Yeah. What do you think? A couple of months ago, I read a tweet by Naval. Changing your interpretation of your past is often as good as changing your past. What do you think the thin line is between changing the interpretation of your past so you can relate better to it and be more free in how you see your future self, and like lying about your past? Like you can't twist everything in another direction than it happened.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't want to sound too guru talking about that stuff. I don't know. I'm just going to say some obvious things. If you change the facts, right, and you say that you were born in the Netherlands when really you were born in Mississippi, that's not reinterpreting the past. That's just lying. But I suppose the intent behind that remark, that claim, is, seeing a struggle as something that was actually a source of strength rather than something that handicapped you in life. That would make that kind of statement true. And we just get into, I don't know, self-evident truths very quickly with that. It's nice for a motivational poster. Well, here's the thing. I'm going to geek out for 1 second. Who can argue with that, right? Unless we sort of willfully misconstrue it to suggest that the intent of the claimer is that we should lie. And I don't think that was the intent. I think what he's suggesting, which the Stoics have been suggesting for a long time, right? Just go read Epictetus and you're going to read effectively the same thing. Man is not troubled by events, but rather by the meaning he assigns to events. That is, stuff happens, and the meaning is not in the stuff that happens, the meaning we assign to it. But the problem with Stoicism, one philosophical problem with Stoicism, perhaps, is what in philosophy and epistemology is called voluntarism. So under a voluntarist position, actually the assumption is that we can will ourselves to believe things, that beliefs are voluntary. But, well, can you believe right now that I'm actually in the room with you? No, right? You can say that you do. You can play some bad philosophy game with me and say, yeah, actually, I can really believe that you're here in the room with me. And you can't really believe that unless you take those words to mean something other than they normally mean in English, typically. So, can we will ourselves to interpret the past? I don't know. But that seems to be implicit in that kind of thing. And I think that's a problem with Stoicism. So if on the other hand, what the claim is saying is, and it's not said there, but it could be, if you go through some kind of process that then enables you to reinterpret your experiences, then you might live a better life. Okay, who can argue with that? But just that we can flip a switch and say, oh, actually, I'm going to interpret losing my job, right? Someone loses their job and they have a mortgage and their house gets repossessed. I'm going to interpret that as just being wonderful. That frees me and that liberates me. I don't like that kind of self-help bullshit, just supposing that we have this infinite capacity to will ourselves to believe whatever we want. If we interpret it like that, then obviously it's nonsense. At least it seems to me nonsense. So that voluntarism, can we will ourselves to believe things, which is, I was about to geek out and go into pragmatism and William James and epistemology, but no one was here about that. So that's, you asked the question, and I think it really depends. You said you studied philosophy for a bit. That kind of stuff, if you want to be kind of at least a little bit rigorous with it, you have to kind of poke it and see what it means, and not, I would advise, adopt because it sounds good and it gets social media likes, a kind of just happy version of something that's actually philosophically flimsy. So that was a very long roundabout way of answering your question.
But it was a very good point about voluntarism. And I think that's also something I wanted to ask you about. Like, if you're crafting a new story for yourself and you're making up a new story about your future, then that's going to, you can make or break it by actually believing that story. So I figure that the processes you're teaching people and you're guiding people through are to find a better story that they also actually can believe in, and maybe let them believe in that story. And stuff like the visualization you told about, like the Tony Robbins visualization, is you first go into a desired future state and you actually see that desired future state, and then from there you can craft your own story towards that desired future state.
Yep, and if I understand you correctly, if I can actually plausibly believe that future state, it's okay. If I can't, right, if it's so sci-fi, far out, implausible to me, then I think it's useless. Here's an example. On May 9th, 2016, I woke up. At the time, my wife was pregnant with our first kid. We only have one kid now. With our kid, our first kid, and I decided, I'd gone out drinking with some students the night before. Got home about 11 o'clock, no big deal. But I woke up, I thought, I got a kid coming. Do I want her dad to go out and have beer until 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night? Actually, no. I'm getting kind of fat. I'm starting to look like a dad. I don't even have a kid yet. I'm starting to look like a dad. No, I want my kid's father to be better than this. Okay, so let me fix some things. I just kind of had this slow decline of too many nice dinners, too much this and that. I realized, okay, I need to go back to the way I used to be, fitter, stronger. And then on July 3rd, I was looking at something online and I came across something by a company called SEAL Fit, started by a former Navy SEAL. And he had something called Kokoro Camp, where the business model is very simple. Basically, you pay them, I forget what it is, $3,000, I think, to make you miserable for a few days, and they simulate Navy SEAL Hell Week. And I thought, okay, if I sign up for that, you gotta be really fit to hope to make it through that. I'll sign up for that, and that'll be a commitment mechanism to make sure that I stay on this path that I started back in May. So I signed up for it. We booked an Airbnb in San Diego. I was going to go do this Kokoro, this Navy SEAL training for civilians. Miserable few days. You don't sleep, you just run. I watched the videos. Okay, I'll do that. And then I started training. I got strong. I got fit. And one exercise that we were encouraged to do as part of the training was to visualize ourselves succeeding there. And I would sit down and I meditated every day. So I had just a 3-year every day I meditated streak. So I would sit down, I would meditate, and I would say, okay, let me do the visualization now, and let me see myself at 46 years old succeeding at Kokoro, at this Navy SEAL camp. And I would sit down to do it, and I would imagine going through it, and I was never able to imagine myself doing it. I would sit down and I would try to do it. And I would try to imagine, kind of crossing the finish line of the marathon. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't actually imagine myself doing it. I'd paid, we had an Airbnb booked. I was still training. I could do 20 pull ups. But when I tried to do it, I just couldn't imagine it. And okay, let me try again. Let me try again. Okay, just can't imagine it. And then we went, flew, had a baby at the time. Wife, Quinn, my daughter, they stayed at the Airbnb. I took an Uber to where the event was going to be, met in a parking lot with all the other people. And on the first day, halfway through the first day of what was going to be 2.5 days, no sleep continuous, halfway through the first day, ding, 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 I quit. I was one of the first people to quit. Mm-hmm. It was me and about a 16-year-old girl. And maybe even she quit after I did. And I mean, she didn't look particularly fit, I will just say that. But I think I quit before she did. I was one of the first people to quit. I spent over a year training for this thing, and I was one of the first people to quit, spent, I don't know, over $10,000 to go do this thing. And I quit. And I almost feel now like it was a foregone conclusion that when I was trying to visualize it, I just couldn't imagine it. And then when it started sucking that day, it just became clear to me, like, who are you fooling, man? Like, you know you're not going to finish this. I wasn't thinking this. I wasn't really having conscious thoughts about it. I just witnessed myself ringing the bell. I'm done. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what would have happened if I could have willed myself making it through. I don't think I would have finished. I didn't train the right way, but maybe I would have made it a little bit longer. So there's something to being able to actually plausibly see those futures. And what I don't think helps, and I'm just talking nonsense now. I don't have any way to substantiate this, and it goes back to your previous question, trying to will yourself to believe something of that future state that you just really honestly can't sincerely buy into, but you claim to others that you can imagine it, or you even try to lie to yourself, but you know that you really don't believe it. I don't think that's healthy. I think there's a way that with story you can start to delude yourselves. Oh, I'll move to California and I'll just be an actor. I'll get into the movies. People can, run from their past. Very common thing. People don't like where they are, so they imagine some future for themselves, and they don't really believe it, and they tell other people around them this story of this future they're going to have. But I think if you don't really believe it, and back to the voluntarism, I don't think you can will yourself to believe it. I think it's just a kind of bottom-up process. If you don't really believe it, I think it's risky to expect that it's going to turn out well for you, potentially. But if you do believe it, and I did believe the Tony Robbins second scenario, seemed incredibly plausible to me. I thought it was going to be California, but we just bought a house in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So I went to UNC Chapel Hill, my wife went to Duke, and we just bought a place in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We got 2.5 acres, trees, and it's not the coast with rocks out there with the breeze blowing, but it's got trees, and we have boulders in our yard. And back then, I was seeing something like this. And I could imagine back then that it was going to turn out well. It just kind of accelerated quite a bit. But I wouldn't have been able to quit my nice, safe job so easily if that world hadn't been so plausible. Okay, just one more, just repetition. Sorry, as a professor, you repeat. If you don't believe it, if you know it's bullshit, then stop lying to yourself, stop lying to other people. But if you do believe it and you sincerely believe it, it can be an incredibly powerful motivating force.
Okay, yeah, very clear. And how do you guide people to like better beliefs, like more freeing beliefs for them that they are also going to believe?
I don't know what that means.
How do you help how do you help people to like find some story about a better state of their future self that they're going to believe, and not because they, like for me, for example, I can tell myself that I at one point am going to become a great speaker and I'm going to speak at events and I'm really comfortable speaking in all situations, etc. But maybe I don't really believe that about myself. How can I find something else that I am going to believe? Like, do you know where I'm heading?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I understand now.
Okay.
Do you want me to answer, or do you want me to wait for you to finish asking your re-ask?
Yeah, I think the last part to make it extra clear is that I think there's always the like possible benefit for me to be able to think about a better story for my future self that I can pursue. But not every story is possible to pursue because I'm not really believing in every story. But how do you guide me towards the best story for me that I am going to believe and I'm going to pursue?
Yep, understood. Do you know Stephen Pressfield? The
Not
War of
really.
Art, Gates of Fire. So there's a
Oh,
guy
I
called, yep, Stephen Pressfield,
think
and
so.
everyone, if you're a writer, a creative, or not, everyone, in my opinion, should read The War of Art.
Mm-hmm.
And in The War of Art, what he's mainly focused on is the creative process. And if you're ever engaged in anything creative, and life should be a creative process, construed correctly, in my opinion, then you're going to come up against what he calls resistance. Resistance is that insidious force. No, wait, you can't do that. You should wait later on. And he argues that if you want to do anything, you need to overcome resistance. And there's this discontinuity between allowing resistance to stop you and not. And he calls it turning pro. So he says there's this discontinuous moment where you decide, look, no matter what, I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to talk about doing it. Maybe I'll do it later. I'm just going to do it. Okay, so I'm answering your question, believe it or not. So how do you decide what a good story is? Well, basically by eliminating stories that aren't good, that are implausible. How do you do that? You say, I want to be a great public speaker someday. Okay, if that's true, then let me give you an assignment. Okay, the assignment is for you to shoot a 2-minute video and post it on LinkedIn tomorrow about your story and the value that you found in being this sequential dilettante, right? You have these hobbies that you do. And go do that. No, but I haven't really crafted the story yet. Look, I'm telling you, I know better than you do. I'm claiming, because I do this all the time, that if you do that, if you put yourself out there right now and you force yourself to commit to doing that, in the long run, you will be better than if you don't do that. Oh, no, wait, I'm not really ready yet. Okay, well, that's resistance telling you that you're not ready, I would argue. And so you're going to do that, and that's something you're going to do. You just showed me that it's false. At least you gave me good evidence that it's not true. Why? Because if you turn pro, if you cross that chasm, if you flip the switch, then you're just going to do it, because resistance is what stops you from doing these kinds of things. Just that insidious force. Yeah, but no, I'll wait. No, I'm not really ready yet. That could hurt me. And when you turn pro, you don't care about any of that. You just say, I have a goal and I'm going to achieve that goal. And doing that video and posting it publicly is the equivalent of going and running 10 miles, right? In this journey towards this goal that you have. And if you're not willing to go and run and do the 10 miles, then you're never going to complete Kokoro. You're not going to complete the marathon. You're not going to lose the weight. You're not going to do anything. So the best way, in my opinion, it seems to me, and how else could my opinion be but anything that seems to me? That was tautological. That was a filler as I collected my thought. The best way to find it is just simply by ruling out the stuff that is lies, that is just this self-deception. And if you don't turn pro, it's a lie. You can try to be all motivational speaker and everything is happy and we should all get a trophy and allow yourself to believe a bunch of junk. But if you're saying, next week you're going to become a good storyteller, or next month, after you go order some books on Amazon and they get delivered to you and then you read them then you'll start trying to practice storytelling. You want to be a good storyteller. And you wait and you procrastinate on ordering on Amazon, and you get the cheapest shipping possible because you know you don't want the books to come. Because when they come, you got to read them. And after you read them, you need to put yourself out there and start practicing. If you just keep delaying all of that stuff, you're just lying to yourself. Okay, what's the value? There's no value. But if you say, I want to be a better storyteller, okay, well, here's what you do. You go out with some friends tomorrow night, and everyone's sitting there drinking beer. Suppose there's no COVID. And you tell a story. You plan what that story is going to be. And with your 5, 6 friends sitting there talking nonsense, people looking at their phones, you try to tell a story and see if you can get all of their attention and just tell them a 2-minute story. Oh, no, I'm not ready yet. Okay, so you're going to wait and order a book off Amazon, get a camel to bring it to you across the ocean, and it's going to arrive 3 years from now, and then you're going to read it, but really you fall asleep when you're reading, and you're a little bit busy at work, so you don't have a chance to read it. You're never going to do it. So what am I doing? I'm rambling to make a point. What's the point? You asked the question, how do you help people find those beliefs? The best way to do it is because a lot of the ideas, the futures that people have for themselves, in many cases, they will be lies. They'll be romantic notions that sound good, but sincerely people don't believe it. And if they do believe it, they will do the work. They will turn pro and they will start doing it. And hopefully for a lot of people at least, there will be those things for which they will be ready to turn pro right now. Not, no, right now I got a job, later on, maybe when I'm 40, I'll do it. Okay, maybe, but if you really mean it, you will be doing it right now. You will turn pro. So that's how you do it. You just issue a challenge, and the pro will accept the challenge. The amateur, in Pressfield's language, will just keep being a victim of resistance and have a bunch of excuses.
Okay, yeah, that absolutely answers my question, and I think then in that way you also get to a way more genuine story to yourself, much more authentic story to yourself, because you're eliminating things on your own path in the direction you're already going or you want to go. So instead of just making up other stories that you want to pursue or things that you want to do, it's better to see what's eliminating on your way right now.
Yeah, and this is a very old idea. So economists call it revealed preferences. Okay, so don't tell me what you want. I'm just gonna watch you, right? And if you say you want to be fit, but I see you just sitting on your couch, eating loaves of bread, watching Netflix. Okay, so you saying that you want to be fit, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean anything because your preferences have been revealed through your behavior. In social psychology, they had an idea, it's called Bim Self-Perception Theory, which is if you want to know your attitudes, or if you want to know someone else's attitudes better, just to make it easier, don't ask them what their attitudes are about racism or sexism or any ism or anything. Just look at what they do. How do they treat those people? Right? And it comes through action. And as soon as you start viewing all of these things that we've been talking about now for about the past 15 minutes through action, right? What do people actually do? Because we can talk, well, action, I can will myself to believe. Okay, well, for instance, just going back, a callback. If you said, Neil, actually, I can believe that you're in the room with me right now. Okay, if you can actually believe, okay, let me suppose that what could happen if I was in the room with you? Okay, give me a bloody nose right now. Punch me. Give me a bloody nose. If you really believe it, then you believe that you can give me a bloody nose. What are you going to do to give me a bloody nose? Because if I was in the room with you, right, you could do something to give me a bloody nose. So if you tell me that you believe something, I can start issuing challenges to see if you really believe it. If you tell me that you want to do something, I can start issuing challenges where there will be a behavioral test to see, okay, do you really want it or do you not really want it? And I think we should have much less talk about what we want and just really look at actions. And then that becomes good for our stories, which is not what do I want my story to be at some high level. I want to be creative. I don't know what people would want to do at some abstract level, but if you want to develop good stories, the best stories are highly specific and highly concrete. Okay? And that typically that's going to mean, actions. Okay, so give me a mental movie right now of the specific actions that you were going to take in order to achieve that goal. Okay, so if you're going to be a great speaker someday, let's work out concretely, specifically, what you're going to do along the way, but let's start with right now. Well, I'm going to work on my presence. I'm going to work on my confidence. No, what are you going to do to work on your confidence? Specifically, concretely. And the more you link all of this stuff that we're talking to specific actions, the easier you can test your own commitment. And then also, going back to storytelling, because that's broadly, I suppose, the theme of what we're talking about, when you have those concrete instances in mind, then you can actually start using them in your own storytelling, either to communicate to others what you're going to do, or maybe in your own visualization, your own daydreaming of what you're going to do. You don't daydream about being creative. You daydream about writing 2,000 words a day, right, in order to complete a novel and sitting at Starbucks. Okay, so let's, what are you going to be wearing? You're going to go buy a beret, you're going to fly to France and buy a beret, and then you're going to sit in a cafe and you're going to write 2,000 words a day. Let's look very specifically, concretely at the actions you're going to take. They're going to put you on this path to this promised land that you imagine. And until we see that map very, very clearly, those specific behaviors that are going to take you there is bullshit, most likely. Or at least you haven't thought it through carefully enough. You don't really have a plan. Right? And a goal without a plan is just a wish, that kind of thing. So it's all of this stuff could just, if it comes down to behavior, and we can turn that behavior into these movies, these mental movies, what I call stories, it's a more powerful cognitive, intellectual tool for us because it gives us some guidance. And just to, so you know where I'm coming from, because there's a bit of background on this that makes it more meaningful to me than it would be to someone else listening, is I think there's a big communication trap that a lot of people fall into, and they operate at a level of kind of lecturing and speech giving, which is, I want to be inspirational, I want to be motivational, I want to be creative, I want to be great, I want to be outstanding. And people use a lot of abstractions, a lot of adjectives to describe things. Okay? And I mean, if you're ever unfortunate enough to have a corporate job where you have to sit through meetings and hear people give presentations, you'll see a lot of this. People talk at a very conceptual, abstract level. And the antithesis of that in my world in which I operate is the story. In the story, you don't talk at a high level about being inspirational or a thought leader or groundbreaking or innovative. Or, a peeve of mine is, what is it that people like to say? Passionate. Okay, don't say you're passionate about something. Show me specifically what you do, concretely, that shows to me that you're passionate. Right? Because if you say you're passionate about public speaking, I say, okay, what have you done? Well, nothing. I just think it would be great. Okay, but show me, what have you done? I just think it's, okay, then you don't mean it. But if you say, actually, I went to Amsterdam and I stood on a street corner and I lectured about Epictetus to anyone who was walking by, and I put a cup out and I made 43 euros lecturing to random strangers about Roman Stoicism. Okay, good, that's practice, right? That's really putting yourself out there, because a lot of people would be uncomfortable doing that. Okay, so the value in what I'm saying of illustrating things through action concretely, turning them into stories, and getting away from abstraction, it mitigates the self-delusion that we fall into, and it just mitigates the confusion generally. Because when we can operate at a level of abstraction, which probably I'm operating at right now, we can say all kind of bullshit, which probably I'm doing right now. And I'm trying to... And there's just some value in just very concrete, specific, illustrating storytelling. You dig me?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, absolutely. I also totally recognize it this in like my shift towards I think in the past few years, especially more years ago, I was kind of more enjoying this abstraction and liking to think about like meta thought and thinking about thinking and stuff like that. Also always busy with reading about mental models and reading about rationality and reading about how to think better and stuff like that. But I was never actually practicing any of that. I was never actually putting it into practice and just trying it out. And I always was searching for more information on it and never acting on the information. So I noticed in myself that I um on stuff that's abstract to me right now, like um like for example my anthropology study right now can be kind of abstract sometimes. So I notice a huge resistance now towards abstraction. And that's also why I, for example, wanted to make this podcast more um, actionable so that people can have actionable advice, that is concrete stuff they can actually do from these podcasts, and not only people talking about topics, but maybe getting me some live practice in on stuff like that. So I'm kind of way more looking for things where I can take action and where I can take concrete action. And I feel a huge feeling of resistance towards abstraction. No, I'm noticing in myself. So I totally recognize this, what you're telling about, that that's a better way to also take that action.
Yep. So what you're describing, the word I use often to describe this, procrastination. I'll read
Mm.
more, I'll learn more about mental models, I'll do this and that. You know, in the meantime, none of it is being applied. It's just also it's just games, right? I've been in academia for a long time, and at least the kind of social science academia in which I operated, it's 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 a bunch of game playing, right?
Mhm.
Academics write papers that only other academics read, generally speaking, and they quibble with each other and they argue with one another. But it's just it's game playing to it's almost a smug game playing. I'm going to do this and look, I got you there, and look, I know about this and I got you there, and it's some kind of point scoring that you can learn more about rationality, and you can accuse someone of making some thinking error because you read about it in your next debate with someone. And I don't know. I think it's a trick that the academics have played on us, right? So all this stuff, mental models, rationality, we even have all these words right now. A lot of that stuff, maybe a lot of that stuff is useful, definitely, but a lot of it was developed and then pushed on you as a consumer to justify the existence of the academics who are writing it in their ivory tower. In the meantime, there are people out there starting companies and doing stuff while these academics argue with one another and hope that you're going to pay attention to what they're doing. In the meantime, they poison you with this stuff and you end up procrastinating and you're not doing anything, but finally you're feeling some resistance toward it, which is a good thing. So there's a whole kind of intellectual plague, I think, that came from academics playing their goofy games, trying to distinguish themselves from everyone else by having this language like voluntarism, right? Even I've been doing it right now. I can't escape it. All this pretentious garbage I've been saying. And, to unsuspecting young people, we confuse them and we take their tuition dollars and we do all kinds of evil things to them. And really, you should be out doing things, right? You should be on that corner in Amsterdam lecturing about Epictetus if you want to practice your public speaking and not reading something that some bozo academic wrote.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's just absolutely right, and I'm noticing that in improving my speech as well. That like the way I approach public speaking right now was through some framework called ultra speaking, and their philosophy behind this is that public speaking or speaking in general is just learning to at first a bunch of other things, but first learning how to speak before you think. So just trying to get into a state of a speaking flow so that you can actually be comfortable with speaking. And then you can put the practice for speaking in. You don't have to learn about theories on speaking or about frameworks for stories to tell or when to use your hands and stuff like that. This may be coming later if you're going to pursue that path, but at first you just need to learn how to speak and just be comfortable with knowing something to say and letting your brain do the work, and not like letting your brain automatically do the work, and more intuitively speaking than thinking about what you're going to say. So I'm really glad that I like approached it through this way, and I think that's bringing me a lot, and it's also way more fun to train stuff like that instead of preparing with information and then acting on it.
Yeah, that sounds sensible to me. I don't think you need to go read Cicero to learn how to speak, for instance. Let's go study Roman rhetoric before you go do this. I think what they're saying sounds sensible. I never heard of that, but sounds legit.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have some exercise that I or the listeners can like use to improve their storytelling in general? Maybe on the micro level for telling stories to friends, like the most concrete form of storytelling, but also the story they tell about themselves.
Well, let's just stick with for a second with just general storytelling.
Yeah.
The most important thing that you can develop is being specific and concrete. Okay? So don't say, I went to a coffee shop. Okay? You say, I went to the Starbucks on 7th Avenue. You know the one that's got that lady, she runs a cash register, she's about 80 years old with the green hair, with the nose piercing, that old lady? Yeah, that coffee shop. Okay? Because when you're communicating through storytelling, at least as I construe it, which again just amounts to giving the audience a mental movie, the best way to give them a mental movie is by being highly, highly specific. And just listen to a lot of people when they tell stories or just when they communicate, it's, yeah, I went there, I saw my friend, we went to go have dinner, and right, you don't know that they had the butter chicken with the garlic naan and the iced tea with honey in it, right? Served by, and that's what you need to include, the details like that, if you really want to take what you're making, the story, compelling to your audience. Because it's going to be compelling to them when they can start seeing it. And they're only going to start seeing it. Remember, the Starbucks on 7th Avenue, it's got the old lady. She's about 80. She's got the green hair. You know the one with the nose ring? Yeah, that lady. Right? I'm just making up stuff. Mm-hmm. But you hear that, and just even my nonsense that I'm saying, you get some kind of visual representation somewhere stirring. The Starbucks on 7th Avenue with the 80-year-old lady with the green hair with the nose ring. And that's more compelling than, yeah, I went to a coffee shop in my neighborhood to go do some work, right? Just A/B test that, making it highly specific and not making it specific. So the best thing that people don't need to worry about beginnings and middles, ends, hero's journey, all that nonsense. By the way, in my opinion, but I'm just a dilettante. I don't know what the heck I'm talking about, so no one should believe anything I say. But it's my sense that people have made storytelling too complicated. Or like, oh, you need to go read Joseph Campbell, every story is the same, Thousand Faces, Hero's Journey, all of this stuff. You need to go read Aristotle. You don't need to worry about any of that stuff. Right? Some of the best storytellers, the most natural storytellers you know, right? Just the ones who are just speaking before they think, what they end up doing, if you listen to them, is when they talk, they take you on a journey and you experience as if you're there with them. And how do they do that? Just by painting these mental pictures. They can be talking about nonsense, but somehow they transport you to wherever that story is taking place just by talking to you. And most of those people haven't read Joseph Campbell. They don't care about Joseph Campbell. They haven't read Aristotle. They never wrote a Hollywood screenplay. And what they do is they just take you there by being specific. And I think it's really just that simple, right? How do you know if you want to do something? My simple answer before is just look at your behavior. How do you want to make your story? better, your storytelling better. Just make it specific. How do you do that? Well, illustrate, for instance, the concrete behaviors. There's very age-old, at least oldish, storytelling advice, which most people have heard: show, don't tell. Right? You've heard that before. Mm-hmm. Right? So, like, bad storytelling is, yeah, I told him that I was cheating on him, and he got really upset. That's what someone might say. That's horrible storytelling, right? I told him that I was sleeping with John, and he threw his phone through the window, and he slammed the door when he left the room, and all my pictures fell off the wall. I had to sweep up glass for an hour after he left. Okay. Right? Compare it. I told him I was messing around, he got angry. He shut the door, all the pictures fell off the wall, I had to sweep up for an hour. Well, I'm guessing he was angry then, right? Because who shuts a door that makes all the pictures fall off the wall, you got to sweep up glass from the picture frames for an hour, unless they're angry. And one, you get an experience, and it's the same, right? It's the same story, but one is telling, he got angry, which evokes no images whatsoever, right? I don't know what that means, but right, all the pictures fell off the wall, and you were sweeping up glass for an hour, and then people start, what were you thinking as you were sweeping up that glass, right? An hour fixing this mess. He left. Where did he go? And it's just so much richer just by adding a little bit of detail. So the best advice, you said, what's advice for folks? And I said I would just stick with general storytelling and not kind of the story of your life.
Yeah.
It's just that. Just always paint those mental pictures, and it's simple. You don't need to go take any kind of class. Just be specific. Don't say we went and had lunch. Say we went to Burger King and I got a Whopper and I'm pissed off because they didn't have onion rings. I like onion rings a lot and I had to get French fries, but I don't really like them because I like McDonald's better. And you can add these little digressions into your story, but just make it rich and vivid, because just the best natural storytellers when they tell a story, they're not going to say we went to have lunch. They're going to do that. They're going to say, yeah, we went to Burger King and I got a Whopper, but man, I love those onion rings, but they didn't have them. I had to get French fries. And just go to any pub where someone's telling stories, and the guy that people are listening to is going to be saying stuff like that. And the person just boring the heck out of everyone else, all his buddies are looking at their phones and be like, yeah, I went to lunch, and and he's just going to be very non-specific. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a lot of redundancy in my response, but I'm trying to reinforce a very specific point. Show, don't tell. That's what everyone needs to do. Okay? Yeah. Tell them you went to Burger King. Whinge about the onion rings. Be specific. Bring them there.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I love it that it's so simple, so you can always refer back to it in your mind and just put it into practice.
Yep. So here's the thing, right? We just been making up stuff. We got the lady sweeping up the picture frames. Mm-hmm. We got the guy complaining about the onion rings at Burger King. And, if someone hears me say that, and I see them 2 weeks from now, you know what they'll remember? The lady sweeping up the glass. Oh yeah, I remember that one about the lady with the pictures on the wall. Or they'll say something like, I really like onion rings too at Burger King. I don't really like onions, but at Burger King, they're not really onions anyway, and I like them. And from my saying that specific stuff, someone hearing this will remember it. And what's the goal of communication? One of the most important, at the beginning, I said I didn't want to front load things. I don't know if you remember that little parenthetical remark I made, but communication should be objective driven. Okay, communication should be objective driven. And there are 4 basic objectives that you should always have in mind when you communicate, generally speaking, to hedge a little bit. One is, when you speak, the first thing you should be concerned about is making sure that you get the attention of your audience. Right? Because if you don't get the attention of your audience, attention works like a gate. If they're not engaged, if the gate is closed, what's the function of a gate? It keeps stuff out. If your audience is not attending to what you're saying, then you might as well not even be communicating, speaking. Okay, so that's the first goal. The second is, when you communicate, you should always try to get your audience to understand you. You have some intent. There's some point you're trying to make. So you have correct understanding when the interpretation they establish for what it is that you're saying corresponds with your intent. That's what understanding amounts to. Conversely, if the representation they form about your intent is different from your intent, you have misunderstanding to varying degrees. So you want to make sure you get their attention and they understand you. The third goal, when you think about it, and these are sort of sequential, is you want people to remember what you say, at least when it matters. Not always. Sometimes you're just shooting the breeze. But for messages that matter, for a lot of messages, for a lot more messages than I think people think, actually, it would do you well if people actually remembered that you spoke and remembered what you said. The most heroic goal for yourself when you communicate is if you communicate to someone a message, a story, a pitch, whatever it is that you're communicating, if you get their attention, they understand you correctly, they remember it, if they can then retell to someone else what you said, if they can take your story and retell your story to someone else, then that's a 7 standard deviation high quality communication that you had. Why? Because most stuff is boring. People are listening at 50%. There's lots of misunderstanding because people are not listening fully. Because people are not listening fully and not really understanding, often they don't remember correctly what the heck you said. And if they don't remember what you said correctly, they can't retell to other people what it is that you said. But if you can achieve those, and the thing is that you realize, okay, that's kind of a self-evident way of thinking about the objectives of communication generally. Okay, once you realize that those are the goals that are always operating, then you can ask, okay, what are techniques that I can use that maximize the probability that I achieve these sequential goals, right? And they are sequential, right? Because if you don't achieve any of them in that order, attention, understanding, memorable, repeatable, if you don't achieve any of those, if you don't achieve 1, you're not going to get 4. If you don't achieve 2, you're not going to get 3. If you don't achieve 3, you're not going to get 4. If you don't achieve 1, you're not going to get 4, right? It works that way. So then you can say, okay, well, when I'm trying to communicate, let me look ahead and just simplify for a second. How can I take the point that I'm trying to make, what it is that I'm trying to communicate, my story, whatever it is, my pitch, and make it so that when I tell it to him, he can retell it to someone else, some second order person later on. And one of the best ways of doing that generally is storytelling. Okay? Don't say I went to lunch. People forget about that. But if you tell them that you went to Burger King and they didn't have onion rings and you really like onion rings and they gave you some soggy fries and that becomes part of your story, even that boring junk is visual and people won't forget it. Or be more careful. People are less likely to forget it than if you just tell, because it's too vague and people don't get an experience. So you need to think about your communication goals and think like a cognitive scientist. Okay, how can I maximize the probability of doing this? Well, making some kind of auxiliary assumptions that I'll leave in the background by increasing the visual content of the representations that you experience when I'm communicating. That sounds very pretentious, but I mean that. By doing that, actually, I increase the probability that you're going to remember what I'm saying. Because just visual representations are much richer than information that is just encoded as propositions, as sentences. So if I deliberately start taking what I say and I make it more visual for you as you experience it, I increase the chances that it's going to be more engaging, because the Burger King you feel is more engaging than I went to lunch. I was sweeping up glass for an hour after he shut the door and the pictures fell at the wall is more engaging than he got angry at me. So by making it visual, you make it more engaging. That's the attention gate going up. Hopefully you'll make it easier to understand. You make it more memorable because those visual representations are better retained, and that makes it easier for people to talk about. So what's my point? You don't just wing it. You realize that actually you have this kind of math problem to solve. Okay, I need to do this so that I get that, so that happens, so that happens. Okay, how do I say this so that it'll be easy for people to remember and then repeat later on? How do I package it? And you'll find generally it's not with the kind of corporate speech that people tend to give. Okay, and I don't just mean in corporate settings, but I just mean the high degree of telling when a lot of people at least, communicate with one another at the abstract level. What's going to be easy for people to repeat later on is, right, if you say, I'm passionate about social impact, a month from now, I'm not going to remember that, right? Because 50% of the people I meet say they're passionate about that stuff. Okay, but if you tell me that you left your job as a director, no, as an associate, I don't care. It doesn't need to be that senior. I don't need to suppose you made a lot of money. But you were an associate at Goldman Sachs, whatever that means. And you went to, I don't know, Mozambique. No, probably. You went to Congo to build schools for children. So you left, if you tell me that you left Goldman Sachs because you really care about education and you went to the Congo to build schools and you were there for 6 years building schools, I'm going to remember that. First of all, I want to talk to you at the party if you were doing that, and I'm going to remember that. But if you say that you're passionate about social impact, I'm not going to remember that. Okay, so again, go away from the abstraction, go to those specific concrete behaviors, make it visual. Okay, tell me what the schools look like. Tell me about the carpenter you were working with. Tell me about the car that you were taking from your compound to the job site every day when you were building those schools, and paint that picture for me, and I'm never going to forget it. But go on LinkedIn, go on some other place where people are trying to project something about themselves, and look at all the abstract, meaningless telling that you see, and you can go through it, and you won't remember any of it, and you'll hit the one guy, right, talking that every day he went on the purple school bus to the job site in the Congo where they were building a school, and he worked with, there was a guy called Shelley, who was the main carpenter at the website, and he tells about the purple bus and Shelley, and he paints a picture. If you read a little paragraph like that, you're not going to forget it. Or, again, to be careful in case any academics are listening because they like to nitpick and poke because they don't have anything better to do, you're less likely to forget it if you show it rather than tell it, and just start communicating that way. Am I still 30 minutes later answering the same question that you asked me?
Kind of, but it's I like how you talk about it, and I was realizing throughout this that like show don't tell is the foundation of everything we talked about today. So it's kind of important to talk about it like this. Also in the first part where we were talking about more this macro storytelling about your personal narrative, that's also about making it really visual for yourself and show what you're doing and don't tell yourself what you're doing. So yeah, cool that this is all the foundation for storytelling in the macro and the micro. So nice.
Yes, exactly.
And well, yeah, thanks a lot for all the information about storytelling, and really enjoyed this episode. Like that we talked for 30 minutes about changing the interpretation of your pulse and stuff like that, and really glad how this turned out. Thank you for being here today, man.
Cool, man. Thank you very much.